Well, hey, Dan Stein here. It's April the 15th, and I'm talking to RJ Hauman, who's FAIR's Government Relations Director. And we are both, of course, staying safe inside. That doesn't mean that we're playing it safe when it comes to our professional activities. We're going to talk about some of the immigration issues that are facing the American people right now. Hey, you doing, RJ? How's everything in California?
Great, Dan. How about you?
Pretty good. Well, I've been reading the newspapers and talking to our sources out there, and it's kind of interesting because all I hear is about how immigrants are on the front line of coronavirus. Now, I had the impression that Americans were actually working in these fields too. In fact, the vast majority of people who are working in the healthcare field are Americans. And yet you don't see them getting any real credit out there for fighting on the front lines. It seems to be mostly a propaganda mission by several news organizations and advocacy groups that try to somehow suggest that because we have people in the labor force from other countries that everybody here illegally ought to get amnesty. What's your take on the agenda?
Well, no, it's not just getting amnesty, it's also increasing a flow of guest workers. I mean, you're seeing on the amnesty front, the Supreme Court is expected to rule on DACA, the legality of the program itself, and if the administration had the authority to end it. That was expected, in June, late June. And right now you see a lot of, these media outlets and a lot of these, left-wing open borders groups out there saying, hey, DACA recipients are on the front line in the healthcare industry, helping us with this crisis. So they should get amnesty next time Congress does a phase of a coronavirus bill. And again, at the same time, you have an industry like the agriculture industry saying we need more guest workers in the name of food security. We need more people coming up from Mexico, a country that has done little in their local communities to address the coronavirus crisis or prepare for their own pandemic as well. So again, that's also even more ridiculous when we've had over 17 million American workers added to unemployment since this crisis started. And that's going to go over 20 tomorrow when Department of Labor releases their new numbers. So again, you're having both sides taking advantage of a public health crisis, which is ridiculous. They're asking for what they've always wanted, but at the worst possible time.
Well, yeah, there was a poll came out. Breitbart had a story the other day. 4 in 5 Americans think we need a total moratorium on immigration. Mm-hmm. Not a bad idea. What's the argument to increase foreign labor right now?
Right now, there isn't. And again, too, it's not. And again, they're using a crisis, again, to try to get what they've always wanted. I mean, again, and I saw another poll, too. I believe it was 8 in 10 Americans also said, again, that we must have a complete moratorium on guest workers. Listen, the unemployment rate, the first one that's going to come out for the month of April, should come out around May 4th or 5th. It could be around 20%. You don't need guest workers with over 20 million people now on unemployment. That is something that is not needed. And again, there are forces within the administration, namely in the agriculture department, Sonny Perdue, and even some at
not to mention any names, Sonny Perdue.
Right. Even at some agencies like DHS and state, and even in the White House, again, you have some forces that just back the business community. But right now, we need to stop the guest worker flow until economic conditions return to normal. And even when that happens, we should also look at how many guest workers we have coming in to the country. Again, right now, you're also seeing the ag community trying to decrease wages, not only for guest workers, but for their American workers as well. Wages are already decreasing. Wage depression is going to happen as part of this, as the labor market, isn't tight anymore. Again, people are desperate to work. They'll work for next to nothing. So we're hopeful that the administration will listen to the American workers and fight for them rather than listening to employers and industries who are so dependent on cheap foreign labor.
Well, it seems like it's another example of it. When we hit a crisis in this country, the forces that want to use immigration to profit double down instead of saying, oh, you know what, maybe these laws that were supposed to be designed for one period need to change, or the situation changes, and so we need to have a different practice. For example, H-1Bs, these are the so-called skilled workers. They're not that skilled coming in. Many of them are on these temporary visas, and they're with particular employers. These employers are laying off Americans while they're trying to hang on to their H-1Bs because they don't want to have to file a petition to bring them back in. The Indian government in India is pushing to extend their work authorization and give them the right to change employers. These programs were set up as temporary labor programs, short-term, until American workers could be trained. They have turned into nonstop gravy train sources of hardcore currency and other things for various countries, China, India, Latin America. And nobody wants to recognize that if the purposes for which your H-1B visa was ultimately issued are no longer relevant, then it's time to go back home and help your country, help your own country.
Yeah, no,
Same for these other visa categories.
right. It's interesting you bring that up too, because, Congress was even looking in the past in the CARES Act, which is the round 3 of the stimulus bill, which people may have gotten checks for today.
Right.
They were trying to
Trump bucks, right?
Trump bucks. There you go. They were trying to put in an automatic extension of expiring work authorization, and that could apply to some visa holders as well. They wanted to let them stay again at a time of crisis. But again, I mean,
Democrats are spending 80% of their time focusing on foreign immigrants, not Americans, whether it's special relief provisions, they want to include them in the stimulus package, right? How many billions of dollars are American taxpayers who are losing their jobs supposed to pay to provide stimulus money for illegal aliens who have no right to be in the country?
right. It's interesting that you bring that up, is because
Not a question, by the way.
right. No, but it's interesting you bring that up, because Joe Biden actually had a gaffe the other day when he was talking to Bernie during his
who never meets again.
right. And he basically said, I want to, this again, it was a gaffe. He said, I want to put all the citizens on a path to citizenship. But I mean, that really isn't a gaffe. I mean, that's how Democrats view people that are here illegally. They view them as citizens. You're seeing it at in a lot of localities in Chicago. Any of the local benefits can go to illegal aliens. Governor Newsom's doing that in California. But there's a huge appetite up in Washington, D.C., where I normally am, and you're in the area right now, that we're afraid that in the next round of legislation to address this crisis, either give more funding to hospitals, local communities, and increase small business loan amounts, and maybe even do a second round of the Trump bucks, we're very worried that they're going to try to work in illegal aliens to be eligible for this. And we're also concerned, even at the moment, the legislation, partly due to our efforts and due to what the Trump administration wanted, requires that you have to have a social security number, not an individual tax identification number, to receive it. So that would kind of get rid of most illegal aliens. But as we all know, people that are here illegally steal social security numbers when they file taxes. So a lot of them still could potentially, get some of these benefits. And we're hoping that the administration is doing work behind the scenes to ensure that they don't. But again, there's going to be another big fight, probably in mid-May, maybe late May, maybe early June, when they come back to do another round of this, to potentially insert an amnesty in there, which has nothing to do with the American people right now and what they're going through, and then potentially giving taxpayer dollars to people that are here illegally.
Yeah, I mean, this is why folks have to be vigilant. Now, I know, of course, what you're doing, and I know what FAIR is doing, but during these last several weeks, where has FAIR's focus been, and what have you been working on?
Well, again, we've been, keeping a steady line of communication with the White House and the Trump administration, and also people on Capitol Hill, making sure that the American people are the priority in what happens on the next round. And that, a lot of these people that are struggling financially, how would you feel if the taxes that you paid when you were working, if you're unemployed now go to people that were here illegally? That's not right. American people need to be taken care of in this crisis. And second, there are a lot of concerns on the guest worker front. The administration has the authority, the same statute that they used under the travel ban. They are able to do a complete moratorium on guest workers coming into the country. That's what we need right now. Also you can't just only think of all the American workers that have lost their jobs. Like I said, tomorrow we're going to find out that it's over 20 million since this all started. But think of all the kids who are graduating from college coming up here. There's going to be, I think it's around 4 million potentially this year that are expected to graduate. They're going to go into one of the toughest job markets ever. Do they need more competition from people that are here, that are foreigners that are here? A lot of people that were here from other countries that were at U.S. universities should be required to go home. They shouldn't be there to compete with a lot of these kids that are going to be in a really tough situation. We need to look out for them, not people that came here to take advantage of our system.
Yeah, and the administration, they did freeze the H-2B increase, right? They decided.
Yeah, that was big stuff. But again,
they've also suspended H-1B issuance, new H-1B issuance.
Correct. They have
but that's something, right?
Right. The administration has taken some positive steps here. As you said, acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf did stop an H-2B increase that was going to happen, which shouldn't have happened in the first place. And And I think, when he did that, you saw a lot of reaction from a lot of seasonal employers. The Seasonal Employment Alliance is a big coalition. They're just saying had these smug, just
Oh, they're terrible. They're constantly complaining that, oh, Americans aren't willing to come out here and work for $10 an hour in the fields. I got a great idea. Increase wages, introduce robotics.
Mhm.
The United States needs to rethink the whole way in which it produces food. There's no food shortage in this country. What we have is a supply chain issue.
Yeah. Well, and what they're trying to do
plowing
is,
crops under right now in some cases.
yeah, well, what the ag community is doing is they're just trying to use a crisis to beg for what they've always wanted. And that's access to cheap foreign labor and lower wages, and keeping us in the 18th century when other countries around the world are using, modernization and automation to pick the food. And they're claiming that they need more cheap foreign labor and to pay people less, all in the name of food security. But again, what's secure about a nation of over 320 million people relying on outdated practices and using cheap foreign labor? There's nothing secure about relying on people from all over the world to feed your own citizens. We need to totally rethink how we approach this. And maybe this crisis, as awful as it is, could get us down this path. Not saying that's worth it. But again, I think a lot of people are going to start realizing that a lot of these employers only care about the bottom line. They don't care about the American worker.
Well, certainly for years, we've argued the importance of borders and sovereignty. For many Americans now, they're beginning to realize globalization, while trade has certain benefits, eviscerating national borders and boundaries is simply not in the public interest. We rely on government's association with borders as a way of helping protect the American people, and borders ultimately matter. And FAIR's role in this situation has been kind of key, because we've been playing a vital role between the administration, some members of the national media, and others, in making sure that the interests that those people out there who support us are projected by policymakers. Because you can see, RJ, and I can see how well organized and orchestrated the opposition campaigns are now at every opportunity to use their client media to go out and project, oh, wow, this immigrant did something good, so therefore a couple million need amnesty. Or, I mean, even though the biggest outbreak right now of coronavirus is happening in Queens, New York, and obviously involves a lot of foreign-born, that doesn't get a lot of attention. Instead, 2 kids in detention who get coronavirus, who really aren't any real health risk because they're not in the demographic, well, that's a big story, and the ACLU wants to sue to get them all sprung.
Right.
There's no equity in how the media are covering this issue. FAIR is here. We help to equalize that battle, and that's why folks need to support the organization.
Yeah, and just one kind of thought on what you said of our opposition, if you will, using this crisis to get what they've always wanted. We're not necessarily using this crisis to get unrelated immigration things that we've always wanted. Again, we're ensuring that what Congress is doing, that only American citizens are eligible, not people that came here legally. Listen, we're not fighting in a bill to include a sanctuary city proposal or something like that. We just want to make sure the American workers are protected and that people who get taxpayer benefits are here legally. We're not out there just trying to beg for everything we want, as part of some, as I guess, unrelated asks. We know that a guest worker moratorium and ensuring that the correct people are eligible are directly related to this crisis, and Congress and the administration must act accordingly. I mean, listen,
well, maybe we should up the ask. I mean, if the opposition's going to play the game, why shouldn't we go for the big? I mean, why should our stimulus money be going to sanctuary cities that have not cooperated with the federal government in enforcing immigration law? Washington State has now just sued Greyhound Bus Company, right, for actually allowing the Border Patrol to go on and check for immigration status. Right. I mean, these states are directly in defiance of federal law. Why should our federal stimulus money go to those areas?
See, that's not, I agree with you. And that's honestly, that's something that's been addressed. That's not what I'm exactly saying. I'm just saying unrelated enforcement related, tweaks, allowing ICE to do something and everything, all very important things, but kind of unrelated. But you're right. That's another thing when it comes to eligibility. Okay. Funding should only go to people that comply with federal law, whether you're a jurisdiction or you're a person who came here. Again, that stuff's all related. I'm just saying a lot of the asks that they're doing are completely unrelated to the crisis, and our asks are completely related to it. I mean, again, this is related to immigration overall. And when it comes to, again, the kind of people who are here and the amount of guest workers coming in, I mean, they're in total relation. And we're out there on the front lines fighting for it. We know as a country, we must respond outside of the medical scope. Manufacture more here at home. Don't rely on foreign organizations as much, but most importantly, have tight immigration controls.
Right. All right, we got to leave it there, RJ. Thanks for taking time out. I know it's back to the grindstone, but we'll keep in touch. I'm Dan Stein. That's RJ Hauman. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.